This study actually took the whole child protection system as its framework, because we wanted to understand the use of alternative care inside a child protection system. We found different countries had different elements of a child protection system. Some had very little, some had developed certain components of child protection system. We didn't actually find any countries that we would say had a fully functioning child protection and alternative care system that really met the necessity and suitability principles. So in each country we looked at what was good practice, what were the challenges.
We were lacking a lot of information and basically knowledge about the issue. So having reviewed a bit what we had inside, gathered what colleagues knew or did not know, I would say, we decided that we should, before addressing any issue of this field, gather a minimum of information, a minimum of knowledge. As we were trying to gather, to collect information over the 3 continents, to pick up a few countries in each of them, assuming that they would be representative or illustrative of what the continent tendency or the continent approach to the issue was. I mean, this is a pure assumption, obviously, and it demonstrates to be partially wrong, in the sense that even though there were only 2, the differences among the countries we've selected in one or another continent were strikingly different.
What is surprising in particular, I guess, is that in some countries so much of alternative care is provided by private sources. I mean, we know that these private sources have important roles, but in some countries it's up to 99% of residential facilities that are being run and financed by the private sector, and this is far greater than I would have imagined, even despite having known a large number of country situations myself. Another surprising factor for me was the extent to which laws and policies exist in countries where you might imagine that they did not, but they do exist. But the government is not in a position to enforce those laws and ensure compliance with those laws and policies, precisely because of the fact that the private sector is so influential and important as a caregiving entity that the government is not able to monitor and ensure that the care being given is both necessary and suitable for children.
Data and more data. You cannot build a house with understanding what the foundations are, so I think it's a really essential thing to look at. I would say taking a multi-sectoral approach, again, if we want to really look at the UN guidelines, which are very much the guiding principles under that looked at guided the framework for this piece of research and this study, is prevention of unnecessary family separation and removing children from their families is really essential and key. And that takes a multi-sectoral approach. That isn't just the care system, that is about social protection and education and housing and health and access to employment. So really looking at how different elements of the European Union and the European Commission can take that approach.
In particular, what we need to look at, I think, is the extent to which the EU can enable a number of governments to take in hand the child protection system in their countries. And enabling means not just money, but also to a certain extent expertise, but also remembering that each country has its own way of working, so it has to be very culturally, socio-culturally specific, And the EU can also have an effect on the donors who are, whether they be private or institutional, corporate, who are in fact continuing to fund and enable some of the less desirable residential facilities, the ones who are operating almost as cowboys, whereas they should be ideally looking to fund other forms of more positive alternative care, or indeed preventive services.
We should be comprehensive in the project we do, and it does make a lot of sense. But if you have to take gender, climate change, children, environment, and well, the security, and then you go on the long list of all possible thematic, it makes your life impossible. So it's a matter of good sense. It's not a matter of having a long list and ticking boxes one after the other, so to show that you're the perfect, you have the perfect project because you address all the markers, all the issues, all the mainstreaming priorities, which at the end of the day makes, in my very humble opinion, no sense. It's a matter of, yes, perhaps starting to discuss the issue within our networks, raising the awareness of our colleagues about child rights and specifically this issue of disinstitutionalizations. We do have already some tools to do that, and I'm referring specifically to the UNICEF EU toolkit for children's rights, which is a very important tool we've developed together with UNICEF, and I'm very grateful for having that tool, because it's an excellent instrument to mainstream the children dimension in whatever we do, and the right of the child. So this is already a very good starting basis.
The EU has an awful lot of experience already, as we know, across Central and Eastern Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States, and they have built up a plethora of information and practice. And even though we still say wherever you go in the world it has to be contextually specific, but we all share the same principles. The UN guidelines is a global guidelines with some global principles, and so I think sharing those principles of the UNCRC and the UN guidelines, and then looking at some of, addressing some of those basic principles, what are the shared things that might work, then I think then there is definitely something to build on.